This is the art of startup war. And my name is Brian McMahon, your host and sensei. Here is what we know. 98% of startups will fail every single day, and mostly due to reasons outside your control. The Expert Dojo Startup Accelerator, we look to even up the playing field by sitting down with the greatest minds in startup investment right here in our studio in Silicon Beach, where we look to shine a light on your path to success. Now, our guests each week have invested millions of dollars into startups and are the most respected investors in the world. Now, they share all they know with you, the listener. So join us on Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, starting off your week winning the war against startup failure. And today we got Bill Johnson over at Lotus Entertainment. Now, Bill is I'm not going to say movie mogul, because that would kind of sound a little bit too crass, but certainly a big guy who's been in that space for a massive amount of time. One of the biggest financiers here locally in Los Angeles of movies that many of you have heard of. And Bill is going to say to me in a second, listen, the movies are cool. And yeah, I financed a bunch of movies, but I also built from scratch an insurance company which has got over 100 employees, and building something like that is monster as well. So this is a treat for all of us. And it's a treat for those of you who are wondering, how do I get my movie and get it out there and get it to people like Bill and make some money from it, or possibly get distribution? Those of you who are thinking, I want to build a service business and I want to build it from scratch and I want to understand how to get finance, again, you're going to get feedback from here. And to top it all off, he's just back from Burning Man, which is the most epic festival in the entire world. So you're going to get it straight. You're going to get the most chill and relaxed interview ever. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for coming along. I met Bill for the first time when he was working with a phenomenal startup that we have here. Our folks over at the 360 Dome, who are doing all that great 360 immersive work and trying to look for the businesses of the future. But tell us, what kind of businesses do you love, first of all?
Well, I guess I personally have two very different businesses. One is a stable and steady and great business because it's built on repeatable annuity type income, and the other business is a creative business which has all the ups and downs of creative industries, but has never a dull moment.
I would say it's really funny because it's almost impossible to have two businesses so extreme, like such a right side business and a left side business working hand in hand. How did that develop?
Well, I started my insurance business right out of college, just with a desk and a phone, and slowly built it up over time. And then about 15 years ago, I handed over day-to-day management of it to a friend of mine, and he's been doing a great job of running it ever since. And so that allowed me to step in full-time and focus on the film business.
So when you started off, did you get investment?
I did not, no.
And this is a recurring theme that a lot of the major investors and people who are just in very senior levels of the community here, it just comes back over and over again, is that at the beginning, when really successful people are growing their businesses, and I mean real businesses with real revenue and real profits, you build it based on clients and money at the start, not based on somebody giving you a handout.
Yeah, I mean, I always like the idea of just owning my business and, not being in a position where, I was beholden to investors or, you see it all the time, like the CEO of Uber, right? He just got canned.
That was a bad day.
Yeah, so, maybe he deserved it, maybe he didn't. I don't know all the details, but in any event, I never wanted to be in a position where I might get booted out of my own company that I created.
Yeah, and, a lot of venture capitalists say that. Whenever we have a bunch of them in the room, and I'll always ask the question at the start, what type of money would you strongly suggest that nobody take? They all say, our money. Like, don't take it, because the second you take it, you're in bed with the devil. I mean, it's not a bad devil. Everybody has their job to do and to get it back, but you are on the road to losing control of your business.
I guess also, like for me, There's a lot of talk about doing exits and that sort of thing with businesses, and certainly there's a lot of value to that. But I like the idea of a forever company. Building a company that is going to serve you for your whole life and beyond, your family. And I feel like for sure with the insurance business, I'm building. Even though I've sold some assets over time, I've had the company. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary.
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, and so that's just there's a lot of satisfaction in that for me, as opposed to creating something and then flipping out of it and exiting in 3 to 5 years or whatever that number is.
Yeah, and you really take control of your life as well, because you get the business, you build it up to the level that you're making enough money that you can have what you need to have, and then you can bring other people in for the day-to-day and then follow other dreams that you have so you don't miss out on that as well. I do want to focus a little bit just on the challenges, though, building that up, because some of what we do, I would say, the objective for this podcast, if you arrive in iTunes for the first time, you'll say, cool, the guys at Expert Dojo are showing us how to get investment. Yes and no. I'm actually trying to convince people not to take investment in many cases and just have everybody aware of what the rules of investment are. So when I see somebody like yourself who's built it up from nothing, you've taken it from 1 person to 100, I know how hard that is and how many different barriers you go through, but I also really admire it and want our listeners to be able to look at this road as a really important road they can take. Can you share maybe some of the challenges that you had building it up and how you overcame those, especially the scaling?
Sure. There's been a lot of challenges, and sometimes they come from internal management issues, or just inexperience of decision making and management. Other times they come from external forces that weren't really our fault or out of our control. And I think one of the things for me that's interesting about business is that it is constantly changing, and you have the opportunity running a business to always be evolving with whatever's happening in the world, and evolve or die. I agree with that. I think in general for me, I've just sort of had this idea or this mentality of stay the course. And when those challenges come along, and there's been plenty of them, and sometimes they've felt unbearable at times, I would just sort of like step back and think about, just staying the course, staying with it, and just keep persevering. And when I've pushed through those really challenging times, that's what's always led me to that next level of comfort, ease, money, safety, security.
Yeah. So are those hard times, are they mainly surrounded by money, or is it more about intellectually, or not even intellectually, but just physically being able to get to the next level? Because I always say, with me as a founder, I know I'm an awesome founder of a 1 to 40 person company. I would never be a CEO of a 50 to whatever person company. It's not my skill set. So I know that as you grow in a company, the skill sets required to be successful in those environments change. So was it more of a skill set challenges you faced, like the really big ones, or were they money, especially at the start?
Well, for sure, money just puts pressure. If you're struggling financially, all of the operational issues that come up just feel that much more pressurized. If you're struggling for money, if your company's kicking off a lot of money and you're having management issues or organizational issues, it's certainly helpful to be able to throw money at the problem to try to fix it. But I remember I probably had this period, I don't know, 10 to 15 years into it, and I was just like, I can't take this anymore. It's driving me crazy. And I remember I was talking to my mom, and she worked for me for a long time as like my bookkeeper.
That's cool.
Just keeping an eye on the money. And I remember I called her up one day, and I had some friends who had bought a couple of body shop franchises, that sell those like lotions and soaps and that sort of thing.
Sure.
And they had done pretty well with it. And I had gotten this idea in my head that like I was going to get rid of my insurance business and go buy a couple of body shop franchises, and that was going to be the easier path, And I remember I called her up one day, and I was just saying, I can't take this anymore. And I started chanting body shop over the phone, like as if that was going to solve all the problems, And luckily I just stuck with it, and it's turned out to be a great blessing in my life. And you're right, as far as as you get to those higher employee counts, the challenges change. And I think for myself, I acknowledge that that type of management is not actually my strong suit either, and so that's really all about culture. And I think over the years I've learned a lot about the importance of culture and the importance of building a strong, happy culture. And the guy who's the CEO of the company now, that I've stepped into a chairman role, he's fantastic with, and he's done an amazing job at building a great culture. And whenever I go and we have our holiday parties or whatever, people come up to me and just go out of their way to say how happy they are working there. And so that means a lot. Just makes me feel good on a personal level, but I also know that that's directly tied to why the business is doing well.
Are there any takeaways that people can use from a culture perspective? Because I'm with you 100%. I don't think culture starts late in a company. It starts right at the beginning. So if you could either go back and do it again, or even just take on board what you did, what are the really important cultural aspects you put in place to keep the team happy?
Well, I think integrity is probably at or near the top of the list. I think people have to feel like they're working for an organization that has integrity. I know lots of times if we're confronted with a situation, we'll take a hit financially, vis-a-vis an employee. If there's some conflict that maybe wasn't clearly defined or whatever the case might be, we'll take a hit financially in order to preserve our reputation internally as having integrity and always doing the fair and right thing. I think that's number one. And then, beyond that, it's just a lot of the basics of having a clearly defined job descriptions for everybody and how everybody's fitting together. And we've spent time just working on our communications in the office, and we've had communications consultants come in, and situations aren't always easily resolved, but we have a motto: bring bad news early. So if there's a problem, there's something going wrong, or somebody's not doing their job properly, it's let's get it out there. Let's not let it simmer. Let's get it on the table and discuss it and figure out what the resolution's going to be.
Yeah, I love that. Communication right at the beginning. Let everybody know what's happening all of the time. Set in place very regular and simple communication processes. I love the integrity thing. I always struggled. It's not just here. It's in a lot of places, the whole fake it till you make it. I always struggled with it. I'm getting too old to remember all my lies. It's just much easier just to tell the truth. So, and I also feel that the people that you deal with on a business level, they appreciate it. Rather than pretend that you're a $500 million company, sometimes it's okay to go in and say, we're a tiny company and we're going to compete with this huge company over here. And logic would dictate that you should choose this large company as your contractor. However, let me tell you all of the things that I and we are going to do to make sure that we make up for the fact that we're smaller than these guys, and we make up for it in these areas. And by working that way, you build these deeper relationships and you tap in to the emotions of the people you're dealing with. And I think, I love that you've said it, because I think especially today, authenticity, if you've got it with integrity, then you're leading a company which very few other people are actively doing properly. So
and that's how you build something, I think, that's just really going to be stable and stand the test of time and all the challenges that come out there on those rough seas of business. If your organization is built on a base of deep, stable, loyal relationships because people trust where they're working and they trust the leadership, I think you're going to be better positioned to withstand those challenges.
Yeah, and as you're out there listening to this, just make sure you're taking a note of those 3 points. They're huge parts of building your company. What would you say makes a great entrepreneur? And it can be any industry.
Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is vision. Having a clear vision and being able to articulate that and communicate that. Yeah, I mean, communication is really important, both how you send your message out and how you send your message in. And also, we talked about it a little bit before, just the ability to adapt to changes. You see that all the time of companies that start off with one thing and end up going a different direction. And that's why a lot of times, these investors, they focus on the management team even more than the idea, because they know that the business is going to change and morph over time. And I think great leaders have the ability to look at the seas that they're heading into and figure out how to adjust that boat into the best places.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you focus it on the people, because without the people, you don't have a company, right? That's what it's all based on. Take me to a terrible investment moment. It doesn't have to be an investment that you made. And you definitely do not need to mention the company or the company name or anything like that. But I just, again, want our listeners to get a feel for the types of things they should avoid. So rather than a terrible investment moment where you did everything right or everything was done right and it just went wrong, maybe something where, looking back, there was a great lesson where something could have been different.
Well, I think as an investor, I think it's best to focus your money and energy into things that you know. And I think I've had the most success when I've focused my money and energy into things that I have experienced and deeply understand. And I've had my worst successes when the opposite's been true, when I've put money into something that I didn't really understand, and maybe there was some sexy pitch or whatever. It's Warren Buffett's famous for talking about how he avoided investing in technology because he didn't understand it, and he didn't feel that that was the proper use of his time to go off and try to figure some of these things out, or even that he would ever be able to. And so I have one situation in particular where, I invested in this startup tech company and I didn't understand the business at all. And ultimately, I also later learned that some of the people involved with the company didn't have the greatest integrity, and I hadn't done my homework properly on that regard either. Due diligence on the management team and really knowing what the character of those people is, because again, it is all about the management, and the idea may be great, but if the people executing it don't have integrity, there's a good chance that you're going to get stung.
How can people demonstrate integrity?
It's
a weird question. I even feel weird asking the question. I heard a similar type thing when I was at a conference, and they were talking about the importance of authenticity and how it's really important to be authentic. And then somebody in the audience said, what's the best way to be authentic?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that way when I'm saying this, but are there certain characteristics that you see within people that actually tell you this person has integrity with a high probability of being right?
Well, it's like in the film business, they always talk about the fact that character is action. It's not words, it's action. And so, character can really only be revealed over time because you have to have those opportunities when you're in the trench together and you're getting bombs dropped all over you, and you then get to find out if the person in the trench next to you is going to turn their gun on you, or if they're going to, if they're going to cover your back.
Yeah.
And so that's why, the best way to check people out is to try to find people that they know who you trust, and then find out if they trust them, or that's why management is so critical, because what you're doing when you're hiring a manager with a track record of success, you're hiring all the wars that he's been through and his network of people that he's figured out over time who can really perform and do the job, and that's who he's going to bring to the table with him.
That's huge. I'm going to move past the insurance company, not too fast though, because I've got my wonderful, beautiful little 10-year-old boy here, Liam, and I am definitely getting him. How old were you when you started that insurance company?
22.
22. Okay, so listen, forget video games, forget we're going to create a P.O.O.O.O.O.R. We're doing an insurance company, okay? What, you have a question? You have to come over here if you have a question. Can you ask a quick question?
Of course.
Okay, we got something good here.
One question for you. In your business, you never told us a story about when you had a difficult time. You told us a conclusion about what would happen, but you never told us the story.
You know, I didn't mean to bring in a difficult interviewer, but we got one more question for you. So rather than the conclusion, can you share the story about the difficult time in the insurance business? And then, no more questions, because I want to move directly onto movies.
Sure. Geez, it's funny, that one particular moment I was referencing when I was chanting Body Shop, I can't even remember exactly what the issue was, I think it was like a combination of things that I was feeling overwhelmed with. I can think more, with the film company, just because that's been my focus.
No, let's do movies. I like it.
More recently.
Yeah. So we moved into movies. You're in there. I want to know, before we even get to that, like, how did you move into movies, and what was it that just propelled you to such great successes so fast?
Well, it definitely doesn't feel like so fast, like a lot of things. Anytime somebody that looks like they're an overnight success, they usually are not. I know for myself, when I was building my insurance business, there was a certain point where I was just feeling like I wanted to have a creative component to what I was doing, and so I think just living in Los Angeles, that translated in my head into the film business. And one of the things that I like about what I do with the film side, and really with film, is a bit of a misnomer because it's content, and we're developing things on the TV side and some digital things as well. And the landscape has changed so much that I think I consider myself a content producer more than just a film producer, even though the majority of my background is in film. But anyway, at some point I just decided that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get into the film business, and I didn't know anybody in it. I didn't know anything about it, and I just had that intention, and I started slowly going down this path and sort of banging my head into walls left and right until I slowly over time figured out the way, and met people and started developing a network of relationships and making all my mistakes. And I would say, if there's something that I can look back on and say, like, what could I have done better or done to accelerate the process, I would say that would have been to more proactively seek out mentors. That's, I think, because I grew up without my father around for a long time. I never really looked for mentors in my life. I was always like, I'm going to figure this out for myself, which is a great attitude to have on the one hand, but the right mentor or mentors can just save you so much time of making those mistakes and helping you avoid those mistakes. And so I've started over the last years to develop a network of mentors that I reach out to when I need guidance. But I'd say early on in the process, that's a great thing to do.
You financed, not quite, but almost $1 billion worth of movies, like 700 or 800 million, right?
Yeah.
Did you set out to get into financing of movies, or did you set out to get into content of movies? And how the hell did you raise so much money?
Well, it costs a lot of money to make movies, so there's a lot of money sloshing around, in that world, and it's been interesting, the time that I've had in the business of watching, different waves of money come into Hollywood. Since I've been doing it, I've seen, waves of money come from insurance companies, and then from German tax funds, and then from Wall Street funds, and then, from China right now. A lot of money.
But why are they investing? To make money?
It's a combination of the glamour and the investment.
Okay.
And it is a bit of a it is a bit of a roll of the dice, and the majority of film investments probably lose money, but then some, a handful of them or some percentage of them are incredibly profitable. And I think the challenge of that appeals to a certain type of personality.
Okay. And did you go in to get into financing, or go in to get into content?
Well, basically, I started off and I wrote a script, and then I directed this movie. It was a little movie. I sold it to Showtime, and that was sort of my film school. And
Did you finance it all yourself or get someone to help you?
yeah, it was a little movie, and I financed it all myself.
Okay.
And that was, from money that I had from my other business, and I actually made money on the film, and so I was,
How did you do that?
like I said, I sold it to Showtime, and I sold the U.S. rights to Showtime, and then I sold the international rights.
No, I know, but like, how did you do that?
Oh,
It's so hard. I mean, you how many people write scripts for movies, and how few people get Showtime to pick up the first script for a movie they pulled together after being in insurance for 15 years?
Well, I had a friend who had made a movie, and he sold it to Showtime, and I watched it, and I kind of saw what he did, and I thought I can do that, and so I sat down and I wrote my own script, and I. Yeah, I just did it. I just jumped in the pool. I think there's value into jumping in the pool and just start splashing around and figuring out how to swim. And I've also done that and fallen flat on my face, or just look back and go like, well, that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
But still, you're always learning. And I have a friend of mine who his philosophy, which is interesting. He's like, people will come to a place where there'll be like 4 doors, and they're like, should I go through door A, B, C, or D? And he's like, I don't care, just go through a door.
Yeah.
Because you're probably if you go through door A, you're probably gonna end up going through door B, C, and D later anyway on your journey, and you're just gonna have that much more experience when you get there. And I think there's truth to that.
Yeah, but just don't procrastinate. And so, has it become harder these days if you have a script? Because it seems like I go to Digital Hollywood every year. Every year we take a big old portion of it out. It's a great conference that Victor Harwood does. And we normally have about 200-300 people in the auditorium, and everybody's asking the same thing. I've got this great script. I've got this movie that I want to produce, or I have done a movie, or I've made a short, or I've done a documentary. How do I get investment for those movies? So from your early, humble beginnings of that one movie that you put over to Showtime, how did you then get $700 million worth of movies funded? And has the landscape changed much today for other people who are looking to get movies financed?
Yeah, I mean, the business, I mean, I would say globally, if you look at the film business right now, it's a shrinking bullseye, and that's really because of the rise of the television business. And so that's why I go back and talk about like it's the content production business. And there's more content out there right now than ever before, which means there's more opportunities to get involved in creating content than ever before.
Which makes it harder, right, to get scripts and movies seen or produced, because there's so much that's actually out there.
Yeah, I think it really, there's, a lot of people will tell you, and I would probably agree, that the hardest thing to find is a great script. If you find a great script, you'll get it made. It'll get made. And, when you think about 20 plus years ago now, when Quentin Tarantino came around, and he had written Reservoir Dogs and then Pulp Fiction,
awesome,
and those were just such brilliant scripts. And, those are probably at the top 1% of the examples that I could pull out.
Yeah.
But it's still happening today, and somebody comes out and they come out with a great script, and of course the Hollywood machine will just devour that kind of talent.
But isn't it, by the way, I still pull out my Glengarry Glen Ross tapes every now and again. If I want like the epic cult movie of all time, I want to get Alex Baldwin there. Yeah, that's great. But it feels difficult though to actually, is it just more difficult to make a great script, or is it that people don't know what a great script looks like, or just there's more people doing it? Because I don't see many outside. Let me rephrase it. Bring yourself back 20 years. To where you were back then, what you knew back then, but put yourself in the world of today. What exactly would you produce? And who would you produce it to?
Well, I guess there's maybe I'll come at your question differently, which is like, how do you enter the business?
Yeah, how
right?
do you have a chance?
Yeah, how do you enter
from
the business?
Nowhere?
So like like going back to my example. So I was in a situation. I was a guy who had built a business, which, you know, provided a level of financial security and lifestyle for me. And now I was wanting to come into the Hollywood film business. And so I was in a little bit of a weird place because on the one hand, I couldn't go and just be an assistant somewhere because here I was, you know, I probably had 40 employees at that point, you know, and I was the CEO of a company that was successful. So I wasn't going to go and like start getting coffee for people and start there. But I also wasn't some guy, and there's plenty of them that roll into town with $50 million ready to like play around in the movie business. Yeah, I didn't have that kind of capital. So I had to try to find an entrepreneurial way in where I could still, you know, not be an assistant, but also, you know, edge my way into the business. I think in general, if somebody's coming to me and say, how do I get into the business, or what's the best way to approach it, I say, what do you want to do, and who are the people who are doing what you want to do, and how do you get close to them? You know, because it's all about relationships. And, you know, you might go, you know what, my ultimate goal would be to have a company like Brian Grazer and Ron Howard and Imagine. You know, well, if you're young, go see if you can, you know, get in interning there, because if you're sharp and energetic, who knows how long it's going to be before that opportunity is going to arise for you to move up in that organization or some other organization. But you're going to be right dead in the center of all of the types of relationships that you want to be in, because that's what those guys are, in the very epicenter. And I always think about the film business in particular. I think this is true for any business, but the film business in particular, I think it's about building a network of relationships. And that comes back to, you know, that integrity piece of operating with integrity, letting people see over time that you have character and that you're smart and energetic. And you know what? Those are qualities that are not in huge abundance out there in the world. And I think if you just focus on that and can get around the right people, and those people can recognize that, your path will emerge.
Yeah, and it's really funny. After all these, I have the great pleasure of interviewing so many phenomenal investors who have been in all different types of businesses, from investment banks to VCs to having huge stakes in companies. And this is a recurring theme, is that it's a little bit like what we were talking about with Burning Man at the start, is that you're stripped. Like when you really look at all of us, we're the same. We have the same emotions. We have the same feelings. When we see something sad happening in the world, we generally all react in the same way. If something happy happens to us, like we get a nice birthday present from someone we love, we generally react in the same way. And a lot of the time when we pitch as startups, we approach this from a very logical perspective rather than an emotional perspective. So we just say, listen, I've got a movie, this is the script, you have to do it. If you don't do it, you're going to miss out in the blockbuster of the year. But the person we're talking to is perfectly happy to engage if we give them a good reason to engage on that doesn't involve selling them something straight away. So again, this is just a really big point for everybody listening to this. Find ways to surround yourself with the people who are most aligned with hitting the objectives and the goals that you want to hit. If it's in movies, it's really important. But even if it's as a tech founder, you want to make sure that you're in exactly the same place yourself. I think it's really powerful. Life is a game of, and I don't even want to say a game, life is a journey of communication, emotions, and relationships. And we should follow the startup journey in exactly the same way, but just with a very clear focus of what we want to achieve and very honest, communication with people of what we're trying to get, but it just doesn't have to be straight away. And that there's other things in there as well. That's very cool. So what's next?
What's next? Well,
and you've done I haven't even talked about the movies. Like, you've been involved in a bunch of movies. You've got that new Halle Berry movie, which is coming out pretty soon.
It just came out a couple weeks ago.
I love that you're doing that movie. This thing. So my wife's been in TV for years and years. She's with Televisa, had a show for about 10 years, and she's like a Dr. Phil type down there. But she's spoken for years about the kidnapping of kids and how a kid disappears every couple of seconds, and it's just impossible to believe that in the US this happens. But it does, right?
Yeah. And I know it's kind of crazy to think about. But,
Is that why you like the movie so much, that it just spoke to something which is so unspeakable, but important to get the message out about? Or was it just the fact that, it's a bunch of money?
I would say with that film, first of all, it was just a fun action movie, but yeah, there's something deeper there about a scary aspect of our society, and this is a story of one mother's response to the scariest thing that can happen to someone, or one of the scariest things that can happen to someone. I mean, in general, I'm interested in working in the media to try to raise consciousness and focusing on stories that are positive, inspirational, and raising consciousness in some way. That's my passion. That's my ultimate reason why I'm in this business. And sometimes the films that I get involved with, are higher or lower up on that sort of measurement, but that's always there somewhere, of wanting to feel good about that.
And for you, just doing more and more movies in that type of space, that's going to tick that box? Or are you ever going to move out? You ever going to move into spaces like, come on, you've done insurance, you've moved to movies. Isn't it time for Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, going to the moon?
I mean, look, my family and I are about to leave on a 9-month travel around the world. We have twins that are 9, a boy and a girl, and so we've decided to take the next 9 months and travel around the world together and just have that experience. And so that's I guess what's next up for me. I mean, I'm going to be continuing to work while I'm on the road, but I think for me right now at this point in my life, I see the most value in experience and relationships, giving service. I guess that was one of the things I was thinking about earlier when you said something that triggered it. Was just like, I feel like in my business endeavors, but also in my life, like I like to show up with a mentality of like, I'm here to be of service, and I'm here to be of service to my employees, to my partners, to our customers. And I think if you're always showing up every day with the intention of, I'm here to serve, I'm here to teach, I'm here to help, that's just, you can't go wrong.
You'll attract the right people.
Yeah.
I found that. Look, I got a pay it forward bracelet that I've had in my hand for 5 years. Like, never took it off. It's all about creating that great circle of giving, but not in a way that you're taking advantage of. But even if you are, you learn once. And I say, I've had partners and people I've worked with who've taken advantage of me. And I'm like, man, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Like, that only cost me $3,000.
Yeah.
Like, that is the most wonderful thing that's happened to me today, because I never have to deal with you again. Now that I know that you're a cheat and a crook, like, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the concept of what life's about. Like, if you are in this pay it forward world and you want to give to people, you'll surround yourself with people like that. And a lot of the stuff which you feel is impossible to get will attract itself to you. I'm a huge believer in that. Also a massive believer in traveling. I've lived in 40 countries. And this little guy beside me has gone to school in Spain. He's gone to school in Mexico. He's gone to school in Carlsbad, New York. Where else has he gone to school? He's gone to school in everywhere. Northern Ireland, he's gone to school. Travel is that great grounding that makes you realize that the world is a big, beautiful place, and we are all the damn same. But what would you leave everybody with? You've got people listening who are looking to produce movies, write scripts, do startups. They're on their journey and they want to just get to the place that you got to a long time ago. Actually, they want to get to the place that you got to today, which is to say, I'm just about to take 9 months and go and explore the world and have a wonderful time with my family because of everything I've done for the last 20 odd years.
What would my advice be?
Yeah, to get them to exactly that place in the shortest amount of time. If you could give guarantees in there, it would be awesome.
Well, I guess one of the things I was thinking about earlier was, just in terms of building the business and this whole idea of like, retaining the equity and control of your business or taking an investment or whatever the case be. I always like the idea of building a machine that could someday, work for you. And I feel like that's what I've done with my insurance business. I've built this machine, and I like I like working on the machine and tinkering with the machine and building on it, and it just continues to serve me. It's served me for 30 years now, and I anticipate that it's going to keep serving me for a long time. Having a machine will give you a lot of freedom, because you're not, especially once you are no longer a slave to the machine. I think in the early days you'll be a slave to your machine, but then there's going to become that point, if things go well, where you're going to be able to step outside and no longer be a slave to the machine. And I think that's a conscious decision that people make. I see plenty of people who have these massive machines and they're completely enslaved to it, and that seems kind of crazy to me. But maybe it's just that they're so deep into their passion that they don't see it that way. But I like the idea of building a machine that could not enslave you and that can serve you.
That serves you. So create a machine that serves you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think, just the basics of, getting really clear on your vision and your intention of what it is that you want to create, putting that intention out there mentally, energetically, and verbally to all the people you meet, and watching it come true, watching it manifest.
Yeah. Bill Johnson from Lotus Entertainment, when you came into this interview, now world traveler. Thanks for being a part of this. It's been fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. If you know any other entrepreneur equally ambitious as you, then share this podcast by paying it forward to other entrepreneurs who are building your own army. Now, as always, our website, expertdojo.com, is packed with information to help you grow your business, find investment, and train for victory. We also walk our talk and invest in startups every year in our accelerator here in Silicon Beach.
Big shout out to Vince. And if any of you really like this podcast and you think, man, I cannot believe Brian has got such epic quality sound in the middle of an industrial fridge, that is because we have the great Vincent doing all of the editing and everything that we do here. So big shout out to him.
You can always reach out to me at brian@expertdojo.com, and I look forward to being back here again at our regular time next Tuesday, 10 a.m. with another of the world's top investors, helping you win the war against startup failure.